I always believed family comes first. Growing up in a middle-class home in Michigan, my parents taught me the importance of sticking together through tough times. When my tech business finally took off, sharing that success with my family seemed natural. But I never expected that generosity would teach me the hardest lesson about the true nature of some relationships. Before I share what happened when my family demanded an apology, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you have ever had to make a difficult decision about family boundaries. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Detroit where everyone knew each other and most families struggled to make ends meet. My father worked at the local automotive plant, putting in long hours on the assembly line, while my mother worked part-time as a nurse at the community clinic. They never complained about our financial situation, but I remember the hushed conversations after I was supposed to be asleep, worrying about mortgage payments and how to afford new school clothes. Despite our limited resources, my parents emphasized education above all else. "Your brain is the one thing no one can take from you, Cooper," my dad would say, while helping me with math homework. That mindset stuck with me. While other kids in the neighborhood were hanging out after school, I was either studying or tinkering with our family computer, an outdated model my father had brought home from a yard sale. By 16, I had taught myself basic programming and was fixing computers for neighbors to earn extra cash. This side hustle continued through high school and helped fund my community college education. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously: morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening tech support at an electronics store, and weekend computer repair gigs. Sleep was a luxury I could not afford, but I knew education was my ticket to a better life. The turning point came during my second year of college when I developed a simple inventory management system for the electronics store where I worked. My manager was so impressed that he mentioned it to the owner, who offered to pay me to implement it across their 3 locations. That was my first real client and the seed of what would become my company. At 24, with an associate degree in computer science and 4 years of practical experience, I took the biggest risk of my life. I quit all my jobs and started a web development business in my parents' garage. Those early days were brutal. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, working 18-hour days, trying to build a client base. 6 months in, I was ready to give up. My savings had dwindled to almost nothing, and clients were scarce. Then came a stroke of luck. A friend from college, who worked at a mid-sized logistics company, mentioned they needed a complete overhaul of their outdated systems. I pitched them an ambitious proposal, probably undercharging significantly just to get the contract. They took a chance on me, and I poured everything into that project, determined not to let them down. That first major client led to referrals, and by 27, I had my breakthrough. A regional retail chain hired my company to develop a custom point-of-sale system integrated with their online store. The project was featured in a local business magazine, bringing attention and new clients. Suddenly, I was turning down work because I could not handle it all alone. Over the next 5 years, my garage operation transformed into TechSolve Solutions, a respected firm specializing in custom business software. I moved to a real office, downtown, hired talented developers, project managers, and sales staff. By the time I turned 32, my company had grown to over 30 employees and was generating 7-figure revenues. When the first buyout offer came, a larger tech company offering $8 million, I declined. The business was my baby, and I was not ready to give up control. In retrospect, that decision would play a significant role in the family drama that followed. Throughout my journey from struggling student to successful entrepreneur, my parents were proud but increasingly dependent. As my income grew, so did their expectations. What started as helping with occasional bills gradually morphed into regular financial support. I did not mind at first, feeling it was my way of giving back to the people who had sacrificed so much for me. My older sister Alicia had taken a different path. Always charismatic and popular, she married young to her high school sweetheart and seemed happy until her gambling problem emerged. It started innocently with casino trips for girls' nights, but escalated quickly. By the time I was successful, she was divorced and constantly requesting loans to cover debts or rent when her paycheck from waitressing could not stretch far enough. My younger brother Tyler was the artistic one in the family. Talented but directionless, he bounced between college programs, never finishing any. When I started making good money, he decided entrepreneurship was his calling too, but without putting in the work. Every few months he had a new $1 million idea that just needed funding to take off. In the early days of my success, I was eager to help. I remembered the struggles we had faced growing up and wanted to ensure my family never worried about money again. When Alicia needed bail money after a DUI, I paid it. When Tyler wanted to try culinary school, I covered his tuition. When my parents' roof leaked, I handled the repairs. The first signs of entitlement appeared gradually. Instead of gratitude for the roof repair, my mom complained that while they were renovating, maybe they should update the outdated kitchen too. Alicia stopped pretending her requests were loans and simply expected monthly support. Tyler dropped out of culinary school after 2 months, but kept the expensive knife set I had purchased. Through it all, I rationalized their behavior. They were family after all. They had been there for me in their way, and now it was my turn to be there for them. If I felt occasional resentment at their increasing demands, I pushed it aside, telling myself I was fortunate to be in a position to help. Then I met Julia at a charity event. Smart, independent, and kind, she quickly became an important part of my life. As our relationship deepened, she began to notice things about my family dynamics that I had normalized. "Do they ever ask about your day or your challenges?" she asked once after a family dinner, where the conversation had revolved entirely around what everyone needed from me. Julia never criticized directly, but asked questions that made me think. She came from a family that operated differently, where love was not measured in financial terms. Her observations planted seeds of awareness that would later grow into painful realizations. As my personal life was improving with Julia, my business faced its first major challenge. The economic downturn hit our region hard, and several clients either scaled back projects or canceled them entirely. For the first time in years, I was looking at potential layoffs for loyal employees who had helped build my company. To avoid cutting jobs, I made the decision to invest a significant portion of my personal savings back into the business. This meant tightening my own belt and reconsidering some of the financial commitments I had made, including the extent of my family support. When I tried explaining this to my parents, their response was dismissive. "But you sold that software thing last year, right? You must have millions just sitting around," my father said, referring to a minor product acquisition that had been misreported in local media as much larger than it actually was. "This is just temporary," I explained, showing them the company financials. "I need to ensure my employees keep their jobs through this recession. I can still help with your essential expenses, but we need to scale back on extras for a while." My mother looked at me like I had suggested they live on the streets. "After everything we did for you, we went without, so you could have that computer. Now, you have made it, and suddenly you are too good for us." The conversation with my siblings went even worse. Later that week, I overheard an accidental phone call from Tyler to Alicia that had connected without him realizing. "Cooper is being stingy," he was saying. "But I have a plan to get more out of him for my food truck idea. He always gives in if I mention how Dad sacrificed for his education." That moment was like a bucket of ice water. I sat in my office, phone in hand, listening to my siblings strategize about how to manipulate me for money. Was that all I was to them now? An ATM with a guilt button they could press for withdrawals, with Julia's support and encouragement from my therapist, whom I had started seeing to manage business stress. I made the difficult decision to establish clear boundaries. I called a family meeting at my parents' house, which I had purchased for them 3 years earlier. "I love you all. I began trying to keep my voice steady, and I want to continue supporting you in ways that are sustainable for everyone. Moving forward, Mom and Dad, I will provide a monthly stipend that covers your basic needs and some comforts. I handed them a breakdown of what that would include, roughly $4,000, monthly more than generous, but significantly less than the open-ended arrangement we had before. To Alicia, I was firmer. I will not fund your gambling anymore. If you want help getting treatment for addiction, I will pay for that directly to the facility. Otherwise, the random emergency money stops now. Tyler's face turned red before I even addressed him. Your business ventures have cost me over $200,000 with nothing to show for it. Either go back to school and finish a degree which I will support, or find steady employment. No more startup capital. The reaction was immediate and hostile. My mother burst into tears while my father stood up and pointed at the door. If this is how you treat family, maybe you should leave until you remember where you came from. Alicia laughed bitterly. Wow, your little girlfriend has really changed you. You used to care about family. Tyler simply stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows I had paid to replace the previous year. The weeks that followed were painful. My parents initiated a silent treatment that reminded me of high school tactics. Calls went unanswered, messages unread. When I dropped by to check on them, they were either not home or gave one-word responses to my questions. Alicia took a different approach, contacting extended family members with a twisted version of events. According to her, I had suddenly cut everyone off without warning because I had found a new family with Julia and was ashamed of where I came from. The calls and messages from concerned aunts, uncles, and cousins were humiliating. Tyler escalated things further by showing up at my office unannounced, demanding money for a time-sensitive investment opportunity. When my receptionist explained I was in a meeting with investors, he refused to leave, creating a scene in the lobby. I had to excuse myself from the meeting to deal with him, by which point he was shouting about family betrayal in front of clients and employees. The pressure extended to Julia as well. My mother called her directly, suggesting that she was the reason for the family rift and asking her to talk sense into Cooper. Alicia found her at her workplace, a local architecture firm, and confronted her in the parking lot about stealing her brother. Despite all this, I maintained the boundaries I had set. The monthly stipend went into my parents' account as promised. I sent information about gambling addiction resources to Alicia and job listings to Tyler. All were ignored. After 2 months of this treatment, I received a text from my mother about Thanksgiving dinner. The message seemed conciliatory, mentioning how they wanted to put the unpleasantness behind us and be a family again. Wanting to believe in reconciliation, I accepted and brought Julia despite her reservations. It was a setup. When we arrived, not only were my parents and siblings there, but also 2 aunts, an uncle, and our family pastor. They had prepared what amounted to an intervention where one by one they expressed how my greed had hurt the family and how I needed to make amends by resuming my previous financial support. We left before dessert was served with Julia, holding my shaking hand as I drove home in silence. That night I could not sleep, wondering if I was indeed the villain in this story. Had success changed me for the worse? Was I being selfish? The true extent of the betrayal became clear over the following weeks through a series of discoveries. A business contact mentioned in passing that Tyler had approached one of my investors, claiming to represent me in a confidential family venture and seeking funding. Fortunately, the investor had called me directly to confirm before proceeding. Then came a notice from the bank holding the mortgage on my parents' house. They had taken out a second mortgage without telling me, despite the fact that I was a co-signer on the original loan. When confronted, they insisted they had no choice since I was withholding their money. The final straw came in the form of a threatening phone call from a man who refused to identify himself, asking about Alicia's whereabouts and mentioning a substantial debt. After some investigation, I learned she had borrowed $60,000 from a loan shark, assuring him that her rich brother would cover it if she could not pay. Each revelation cut deeper than the last. These were not the actions of people who cared about my well-being, or even recognized me as a person with my own needs and limitations. To them, I had become nothing more than a financial resource to be exploited. The family I had loved and supported had betrayed me in ways I could never have imagined. On a cold December morning, a group text message arrived from my father's family meeting. Our house. 7 p.m. tonight. Non-negotiable. The terse demand was unusual for him, but I agreed to come hoping for resolution. When I arrived, the living room of the house I had purchased was filled not just with my immediate family, but also with several extended family members I rarely saw. My cousin, who was a social media influencer, my uncle, who worked for the city, even my grandmother, who typically avoided family drama, had been brought in from her retirement community. My father stood, as I entered, his expression stern. "Cooper, we have tried to handle this privately, but you have left us no choice. Your recent behavior has hurt this family deeply, and we need to address it once and for all." What followed was an hour of coordinated accusations. I was selfish. I had forgotten where I came from. Success had changed me. I cared more about my company and girlfriend than the people who raised me. Each family member took turns explaining how my financial abuse had caused them hardship and emotional distress. My mother dabbed at tears with a tissue as she described having to cancel her country club membership. Alicia mentioned being unable to afford proper clothes for job interviews. Tyler claimed his entrepreneurial dreams were crushed by my sudden cruelty. Then came the bombshell. My father pulled out a formal letter drafted on legal letterhead. "Our friend Patrick helped us prepare this," he said, referring to a family acquaintance who practiced law. "We wanted to make our expectations clear." The document outlined their demands: an immediate resumption of all previous financial support, plus compensation for the hardship caused by the temporary reduction, a formal apology to be made publicly acknowledging my failure to honor family obligations, and a contractual commitment to fund future needs without question. The alternative was spelled out in black and white. I would be formally disowned, banned from family events, and a press release would be sent to local media about how tech success story Cooper abandoned the family that supported his rise. "You have 1 week to decide," my father concluded, folding the letter and sliding it across the coffee table I had given them last Christmas. I drove home in a daze, eventually pulling over at a scenic overlook because my hands were shaking too badly to continue. Sitting on the hood of my car under the winter stars, I called Julia. "They want me to apologize publicly," I explained after recounting the ambush. To admit I was wrong, and promised to keep supporting everyone indefinitely. Julia was silent for a moment. "What do you want to do? I do not know," I admitted. Part of me still feels guilty, like maybe I am the bad guy here. "Cooper," she said gently, "if a friend told you this story about their family, what would you tell them?" That simple question shifted something in me. I would tell that friend they were being manipulated and abused. I would tell them they deserved better. I would tell them that love does not come with a price tag. The next day, I scheduled an emergency session with my therapist, who helped me see the situation with clarity. "You have not been setting boundaries to punish them," she explained. "You have been setting boundaries because healthy relationships require them." Over the following days, I reviewed years of financial records, text messages, and emails. The pattern was undeniable. What had started as genuine desire to help had morphed into exploitation. I had enabled destructive behavior by making it financially painless. My siblings had abandoned personal growth and responsibility because I had made it unnecessary. My parents had come to see my money as their entitlement rather than my choice. With growing resolve, I made my decision. I would give my family exactly what they asked for a public apology, just not the one they expected. I contacted the community center, where I had recently funded a computer lab, asking to reserve their main hall for a family reconciliation event. I invited extended family, friends, and several community members who knew our family, including my former teachers, neighbors, and even the pastor who had been at the Thanksgiving ambush. My family was thrilled, assuming I had capitulated. My father called his voice warm for the first time in months to say they were proud of me for making the right choice. My mother texted detailed suggestions for the wording of my apology. Alicia and Tyler both sent lists of specific financial needs that had arisen during the unfortunate misunderstanding. For 2 weeks, I prepared meticulously. I compiled financial records, organized text messages and emails, and prepared a presentation that would tell the complete story. Julia worried about the potential fallout, but supported my decision to reclaim my narrative and self-respect. The evening of the event arrived. The community center hall was filled with about 50 people. My family arrived dressed in their finest clothes, my mother already accepting congratulations from relatives for bringing her son back to his senses. I took the podium at precisely 7 o'clock, looking out at the expectant faces. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the microphone, but my voice was steady when I began. Thank you all for coming tonight. Family has always been the most important thing to me, which is why this is so difficult. As requested by my parents, siblings, and extended family, I am here to make a public apology regarding my financial decisions. My mother nodded approvingly from the front row. My father sat tall, a satisfied expression on his face. I would first like to acknowledge some facts, I continued. Over the past 5 years, I have provided my family with financial support totaling more than $700,000. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, showing a detailed breakdown by category and recipient: housing costs, car payments, credit card debt, business investments, gambling losses covered, medical expenses, luxury purchases. I am deeply sorry, I said, watching confusion. Replace satisfaction on my parents' faces that I enabled patterns of financial dependence that ultimately damaged our relationships and hindered personal growth. The room grew silent as I continued through my presentation, showing evidence of escalating demands, manipulative tactics, and ingratitude. I played audio recordings of threats made against me and Julia. I showed the legal letter they had prepared. I detailed the unauthorized mortgage and Tyler's attempt to approach my investors. My greatest regret, I said, making eye contact with each family member, is that I allowed the pursuit of your approval to override my own well-being and boundaries. I apologize for not being honest sooner about the unsustainable and unhealthy dynamic we created. I concluded with my terms for any future relationship: respect for boundaries, acknowledgement of past manipulation, commitment to financial independence, and family therapy. I remain open to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms if you choose to accept these conditions. The stipend for my parents will continue as promised, but all other financial support ends permanently today. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother stood, face contorted with rage, and shouted, "How dare you humiliate us like this?" My father pulled her back into her seat, his expression stony. Alicia was next, calling me a manipulative bastard before storming out. Tyler followed, pausing only to knock over a chair. My parents left without another word, along with most of the extended family. What surprised me were the people who stayed. My third-grade teacher approached to tell me she was proud of the man I had become. A cousin I had always been close with hugged me and whispered it needed to be said. The pastor, looking troubled, asked if we could talk privately sometime about healing paths forward. As the hall emptied, Julia took my hand. "You okay?" I was not sure how to answer. I had lost my family, but perhaps saved myself. The grief and relief competed for space in my chest, making it hard to breathe. The days immediately following my public apology were some of the hardest of my life. Despite knowing I had done the right thing, the finality of the rupture with my family hit me in waves of grief. I would wake up reaching for my phone to text my mom about something, only to remember the current reality. The community reaction was mixed, but predominantly supportive. Several people reached out to share similar experiences with family financial exploitation. Some expressed that they wished they had found the courage to establish boundaries sooner. A few criticized me for airing private family business publicly, but most understood I had merely responded to the public forum my family had demanded. My parents returned my calls and messages with silence. When I drove by their house after 2 weeks of no contact, another car was in the driveway and someone had changed the locks. A neighbor told me my parents had been telling people I had disowned them rather than the other way around. Professionally, I worried the family drama might impact my business, but the opposite occurred. My transparent handling of a difficult personal situation seemed to increase trust among clients and employees. One investor even commented that my clear boundaries showed the kind of decision-making they valued in business partners. Through it all, Julia was my anchor. She never said, "I told you so," despite having gently questioned my family dynamics for months. Instead, she created space for my grief while affirming my decision to break unhealthy patterns. Our relationship deepened through the crisis, and I realized what true support looked like, not demanding and transactional, but freely given with respect. Therapy became an essential part of my healing process. My therapist helped me understand that grief for living relationships can be more complex than grief for those ended by death. I was mourning not just the loss of current relationships, but the family bonds I had thought we had and now realized may never have existed as I imagined. I focused on rebuilding my sense of self outside of my role as family provider. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected while handling family crises. I invested time in mentoring young entrepreneurs from backgrounds similar to mine. I joined a support group for people establishing boundaries with difficult family members finding comfort in shared experiences. Gradually, I built what therapists call a chosen family, a network of friends and mentors who provided the unconditional support I had always sought from my biological family. My business partner, Marcus, became like a brother. My elderly neighbor, Ruth, offered the kind of wise, grandmotherly advice I had missed growing up. Julia's family welcomed me with an openness that showed me what healthy family dynamics could look like. For months, I maintained the stipend for my parents, as promised, though they never acknowledged receiving it. I sent birthday cards that went unanswered. I reached out on holidays with no response. The wall between us seemed impenetrable, and I began to accept that some relationships cannot be saved, no matter how much you want them to be. Then, 6 months after the community center confrontation, I received a text from Tyler, "Can we talk? Not about money, just talk." We met at a neutral coffee shop, both of us visibly nervous. Tyler looked different, somehow smaller, but more present. He had found a job at a local graphic design firm and was living with roommates for the first time in his adult life. "I have been seeing a counselor," he admitted after awkward small talk. "Turns out I have some issues with avoidance and dependency." Who knew his attempt at humor could not hide the vulnerability in his eyes? He did not apologize directly, but he acknowledged he had been on a destructive path. "I was using your money to avoid growing up," he said. "Now I have to do the hard work everyone else does. It sucks, but it is probably what I needed." When he mentioned he was considering an outpatient program for his marijuana dependence, but was concerned about the cost while maintaining rent and car payments, I felt the familiar pull to solve his problem with money. Instead, I asked, "What options have you researched? How can you make this work within your current budget?" We had a real conversation about problem solving without me offering a checkbook solution. Before leaving, I told him I would support his recovery efforts, but in ways that enhanced rather than replaced his own agency, perhaps by helping him find an affordable program or providing transportation to meetings. A month later, I received a letter from my parents. Not a warm reconciliation, but a tentative acknowledgement that the situation had gotten out of hand. They did not take responsibility for their actions, but expressed that they missed the family we used to be. It was a small opening, and I responded with a card suggesting family therapy if they were interested in rebuilding our relationship. Alicia remained the most resistant to change. When we occasionally crossed paths at community events, she was coldly polite at best, openly hostile at worst. It was nearly a year before I learned from Tyler that she had hit rock bottom, losing her apartment and temporarily living in her car before seeking help for her gambling addiction. Even then, our reconciliation was tentative and fragile. She attended a family dinner at my house, bringing store-bought cookies and stiff conversation. When she left, she awkwardly mentioned a job interview the following week. I wished her luck without offering to buy her a new outfit or coach her on interview skills. It was a small moment of normalcy that felt like progress. The journey taught me crucial lessons about the difference between true generosity and enabling. Real generosity comes from love and enhances the recipient's capacity and agency. Enabling comes from guilt or fear and diminishes the recipient's growth and independence. One builds, the other cripples. I learned that healthy boundaries are not walls, but clearly marked doors, indicating where one person ends and another begins. They protect both sides of a relationship from the damage that occurs when those lines blur. Setting boundaries is not selfish, but an act of care for the entire relationship system. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that family relationships, like all relationships, must be based on mutual respect to thrive. When that foundation crumbles, no amount of money or guilt can substitute for its stabilizing force. Today, my life looks different than I ever imagined. Julia and I are engaged, planning a small wedding focused on quality connections rather than obligatory invitations. My company has weathered the economic downturn and emerged stronger, partly because I am no longer distracted by constant family crises. I have established a scholarship fund for first-generation college students from my old neighborhood, turning my financial resources toward creating opportunity rather than dependency. The first recipient reminds me of myself at that age, full of potential, but lacking resources and mentoring him has become a source of genuine joy. My family relationships remain complicated. We are slowly rebuilding trust through small, consistent interactions. Some days are better than others. The old dynamics still attempt to reassert themselves occasionally, but I am better equipped to recognize and redirect them. If my story resonates with you, perhaps you are facing your own difficult decisions about family boundaries. Remember that saying no to exploitation is not saying no to love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complicated relationships. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, share this video with them. Thank you for listening, and remember, true family supports your growth, not just your giving.